Yeah, well, when is this going to end? Slowly stirring the sugar in his mug, Jim thought. Saturday morning began again with a scandal, in which he was indirectly involved. Again, his wife and mother-in-law did not share personal space in the apartment. The man himself preferred to keep silent, because to some extent, he was also to blame for the fact that 3 years after the wedding, he and Haley were still living with his mother-in-law. Jim was a casual wage earner, so he had no permanent job, and therefore no bank could approve a mortgage for his own home. In Dorothy's house, he sat quieter than water and lower than grass, trying not to bother his mother-in-law with his presence. But her main complaint was not to him, but to her daughter. She was not a child for a long time, and it was difficult for two adult women to get along in one limited space. Because of this, in their family constantly happened scandals that arose on an even place. And this time Dorothy was not satisfied with the fact that Haley did not wash her cup after breakfast. "That's enough. I used to have doubts about going on this business trip, but now I realize I can't go without it. And from you, Mom, I'll have a break and make money for the down payment on the mortgage." "And what about me?" Jim said with resentment in his voice. He meant that he would be without his beloved wife for a month. "What about you? You also try to earn something, and with your favorite mother-in-law to discuss what a bad wife I am." The girl didn't take no for an answer. Haley really left 2 days later in the opposite part of the country for a month, with her leaving the situation in the apartment somehow immediately normalized. Although Jim at first just practically stopped leaving his room when his mother-in-law was home. But when son-in-law and mother-in-law met, they talked calmly and good-naturedly, as if eliminating a constant source of discontent in their home. Jim and Dorothy began to talk about topics that they would never have spoken of in common conversation before. And now their time together was a joy. The man began to do more household chores, and soon there was not a single broken thing left at home. His mother-in-law began to cook more, and it was for her son-in-law, not for herself. Seeing his sincere efforts, the woman wanted to thank him, and how to do it, except for culinary delights, she did not think of it. They became like a model family, where everyone was in his place. The only thing they didn't have was, of course, intimacy. Jim became acutely aware of its absence within a week of his wife's departure. It had been many years since he had such a long break in his sex life. So now he was beginning to look more and more at the opposite sex. Dorothy was not yet regarded by him as a sexual object. Her status in a man's life was very clearly defined in his mind. A mother-in-law is a mother-in-law. It's his wife's mother and nothing else. He had long ago decided for himself. However, soon thoughts of intimacy with the woman began to sound in his head more and more intrusive. There was only one way out for the man: self-satisfaction. For one of these actions and accidentally and caught his mother-in-law. Dorothy had returned from work an hour earlier than usual, so Jim had not expected her visit. Of course, he had bolted the bathroom door, but he had forgotten to lock it. Of course, the woman needed to wash her hands after the street, and she didn't want to wait for her son-in-law to vacate the room. She knocked, but immediately pulled the doorknob toward her. Jim's shameful occupation was revealed to her eyes, which he could not even interrupt at once out of surprise. The situation was quite comical. A completely naked man found himself in such a racy position right in front of a mature woman dressed in a strict office suit. No way, a plot from an adult movie. Of course, they were both dumbfounded, but the first to come to her senses, mother-in-law. "You long, and then I need to wash my hands," she said with a smile. "About 5 minutes, if you would be so kind." In the same style, her son-in-law replied. Of course, from shame he immediately wanted to fall through the ground, but he could go no farther than his room. From that moment on, their communication with Dorothy was practically at an end. The man avoided her in every possible way, and even when she called him to eat, he waited until she left the kitchen. So it went on for several days, during which they both managed to run through in their heads many scenarios of conversation, which could have smoothed out the discomfort of the situation. At one point in time, Dorothy decided to explain herself to her son-in-law. She went to the door to his room, knocked on it, but did not break in immediately, but waited for the man's answer. "Come in," Jim shouted. Hi. "Jimmy, let's talk. We're adults after all, and it's very strange to react to what happened the way we do." "I agree." The man was very embarrassed to start a conversation like that. Well, first of all, what I saw is all perfectly normal. You are here, your wife is far away, and you need to fulfill your physical needs somehow. Moreover, someone else on your place would immediately run to cheat, and you, well, decided to cope with your own hands. Dorothy realized that she had said something stupid and stopped talking. The silence was dispelled by the loud laughter of Jim, who laughed nervously in full voice. This laughter relaxed them both at once, and they realized that it was silly for two grown-up people to worry about such a thing. You know, speaking honestly and directly, I understand you perfectly well. I've been living without a man for many years, although you have lived without a wife for only a week and a half. You think I don't think about intimacy? I think about it all the time. The woman's on a roll, but something in my life is wrong, and in recent years I'm very lonely. And I want to. I want it so badly it makes my teeth clench. But, I'm sorry, Dorothy, it's probably because of me and Haley. We're making you uncomfortable and we're keeping you from having a private life. But we'll be out of here soon, I promise. Things are going to get better, you can rest assured. That's not the point, Jimmy. It's just that I've lost my beauty if I ever had any, I guess. That's why I don't attract men. The woman smiled sadly. What are you talking about? You're a very attractive woman. No, Jimmy. I see myself in the mirror. Do not flatter me. Well, I'm going to bed. Tomorrow's a tough day. The woman quickly left the room, so as not to hear any more flattering words. She was not in the mood to adequately perceive them now. Her son-in-law was left alone in a rather strange position. He did not seem to have said anything bad, but as if he had offended the woman. At the same time, he reflected, Dorothy was really quite a pretty and attractive woman. Yes, her character was not perfect, but now it was about her appearance. Jim decided to go to bed early too, in order to forget another unsuccessful attempt at conversation. But after tossing and turning in bed for more than an hour, the man realized that he wouldn't fall asleep. In his head were constantly thinking about his mother-in-law, about her words and her appearance. The man's violent fantasy gradually drove them into a common bed, where they, despite their marital status, solved their intimate problems together. The thought was becoming more and more intrusive by the minute, and Jim realized that there was only one way to get rid of it. He got out of bed and headed for his mother-in-law's room. Dorothy couldn't sleep either. She was having similar thoughts in her head. She had recently seen a completely naked young man in her own bathroom, but unfortunately, it was not her chosen one. However, her mature body demanded a man's touch, and the woman even pulled back the blanket from her half-naked breasts. Jim knocked and entered his mother-in-law's bedroom. She only had time to return the blanket to its place and excitedly uttered, "What did you want? I can't stop thinking about you. You are wrong. You are a very beautiful woman, and sh." Before the key phrase, he was embarrassed. "Jim, I've been thinking about you too. And I want you, Dorothy, and I'm not leaving until you kick me out. I guess I won't do that." She smiled. She threw back the blanket and invited her son-in-law to lie down beside her. The emboldened man almost jumped on the bed to his mother-in-law and immediately kissed her. Feeling that the woman reciprocated, he began to caress her body with his hands, at the same time trying to pull off her nightgown. Dorothy helped him by pulling the blanket aside and then removed the only article of her clothing herself. The unusual couple, as if in an instant, forgot about the awkwardness that had arisen between them and about their marital status. Now they moved only animal instincts, which soon gave them a lot of incomparable pleasure. "Well, am I going?" asked Jim after half an hour of intimacy. "Don't go," the woman begged. "I will not let you go so easily. And tomorrow, if you want, I'll come to visit you. Did you like this story? Let us know in the comments what you liked. Subscribe to our storytelling podcast. Also, don't forget to like and ring the bell so you don't miss more interesting stories. See you soon.